Now, India and China are resetting their once-strained ties.
And the Indian Prime Minister will undertake an official visit to China. That's going to happen later this month.
While the world is watching Putin, Trump, and European leaders decide the future of Ukraine, a massive story is unfolding. On the other side of the world, as India is now officially moving away from the United States and forging a closer relationship with both. You see, India is the world's fastest growing economy. It's a country you would like to have as an ally. But instead of fostering this relationship, Donald Trump has thrown India straight under the bus, hitting the country with some of the highest tariffs of any country in the entire world. For decades, India has occupied a unique place in global politics, with its massive population, rapidly growing economy, and expanding influence. New Delhi has been courted by every major power. The United States, in particular, has long viewed India as the natural partner and Asian ally capable of balancing China's dominance while providing a vast market for American businesses. But instead of tightening that relationship, the Trump administration set it on fire. What could have been a historic partnership is unraveling in ways few thought possible. The breaking point began with tariffs. President Donald Trump imposed some of the harshest trade restrictions on India of any country in the world. Products that had once flowed easily across borders were suddenly saddled with costs so high they threatened entire industries. For Indian exporters, it was a shock. For us importers, it meant higher prices and fewer options. But it wasn't only about tariffs. Trump repeatedly went out of his way to belittle India's economy, at one point even declaring it dead. For a nation that had spent decades cultivating an image as the world's next growth engine, this was more than insulting, it was destabilizing. The irony is sharp. Just a short time earlier, Trump had encouraged Apple and other companies to move their manufacturing away from China and into India. On paper, it made perfect sense. India had the workforce, the capacity, and the ambition to take on the challenge. Billions were invested in new facilities. Yet within months, Trump's trade policies undercut the very opportunity he had once promoted. Prime Minister Narendra Modi had initially been seen as a natural partner for Trump. He was among the first foreign leaders to visit the White House during Trump's second term. Many analysts believed a strong US-India partnership was inevitable. Instead, Modi soon found himself on the receiving end of Washington's unpredictability. Where the European Union eventually gave in to Trump's heavy-handed tactics, India refused. Modi signaled early on that New Delhi would not bow to American pressure, and when tariffs escalated, he looked elsewhere for opportunity. The turning point came when Modi announced his first trip to China in 7 years. This was more than symbolic. It was a declaration that India would not be boxed in by US demands. By opening the door to Beijing, Modi made clear that his country had a plan B. The consequences for the United States were immediate and far-reaching. In pharmaceuticals, nearly 40% of generic drugs consumed by Americans originate from India. Tariffs threatened to drive those costs even higher in a country already struggling with medical expenses. In technology, the risk was just as severe. For decades, Indian students and professionals have powered America's tech boom. Many of Silicon Valley's biggest companies, Alphabet, Microsoft, Adobe, are led by Indian-born CEOs. By discouraging student visas and raising barriers, Washington all but invited India's brightest minds to stay home or look elsewhere. The long-term effect is obvious. A stronger Indian tech sector, likely in collaboration with China, and a weaker pipeline of innovation flowing into the United States. Losing India is not just about economics. It's about geopolitics. For years, India's tense relationship with China served U.S. interests without much effort. Border disputes, historic rivalries, and strategic competition kept Beijing on guard. But with Washington now treating New Delhi as an adversary, that natural alignment has been shattered. Instead of strengthening America's hand in Asia, the Trump administration has weakened it. Instead of creating an alternative to Chinese manufacturing, it has pushed India closer to Beijing. Instead of winning a loyal ally, it has created a frustrated rival. In diplomacy, timing is everything. And in this case, the timing couldn't be worse. At the very moment Washington is trying to contain China's influence across Asia, it has pushed one of its most valuable partners directly into Beijing's orbit. India has always prided itself on being non-aligned. preferring to maintain relationships with multiple global powers rather than choose sides. For decades, that strategy served it well. But in today's shifting world, neutrality comes at a price. Trump's approach left India with little choice but to lean toward China and Russia, the two countries most eager to welcome it. For Washington, this is more than a short-term setback. It's a generational mistake. The United States has lost not just a partner, but the chance to anchor its entire Asian strategy around India's rise. When India began pivoting toward China and Russia, it wasn't a sudden whim. It was the result of months, arguably years of pressure, insults, and strategic miscalculations by Washington. What the United States viewed as tough bargaining, India saw as humiliation. And in international politics, humiliation almost always leads to retribution. The immediate spark for this crisis came from India's decision to keep importing Russian oil despite U.S. sanctions tied to the war in Ukraine. For Washington, this was unacceptable. The Trump administration demanded that India cut ties with Moscow's energy sector, framing it as a test of loyalty. But here's the problem. The United States itself still relies on Russian resources. In 2023, a year after the Ukraine war escalated, America imported more enriched uranium from Russia than from any other country. The European Union also continued buying Russian oil, often funneled through India. For India, the double standard was glaring. Washington wanted New Delhi to sacrifice affordable energy, while American and European companies quietly did the same thing they were being told not to do. That hypocrisy became a breaking point. Prime Minister Narendra Modi responded with a bold move. Not only did he reject U.S. pressure, but he also doubled down on ties with Moscow. He dispatched his national security advisor to Russia, spoke warmly with Vladimir Putin, and even called him a friend in a public statement. In diplomacy, words matter. Calling Putin a friend was a direct jab at Washington, signaling that India had no intention of abandoning its old allies. But Russia wasn't the only option on the table. Modi also turned to Beijing. Announcing his first official trip to China in years, he made clear that India's foreign policy was shifting. Where once India positioned itself as a counterweight to China, now it was preparing to cooperate with its rival. This is monumental. For decades, India and China have clashed, sometimes literally over disputed borders and competing visions of Asian leadership. By opening the door to Beijing, Modi isn't erasing that rivalry, but he is rewriting the rules of engagement. Instead of letting Washington use India as a pawn in its containment strategy, New Delhi is carving out an independent path. For years, U.S. leaders dreamed of moving supply chains out of China. The only realistic alternative on the same scale was India. Billions were poured into Indian factories, and companies like Apple began producing iPhones there for global markets. Trump's tariffs changed that. A 50% duty on Indian goods doesn't just hurt trade, makes it impossible for U.S. companies to seriously consider India as a replacement for China. In trying to punish India, Washington killed its best chance to reduce dependence on Beijing. Indian students and professionals have been the backbone of America's tech revolution. From graduate programs at top universities to leadership positions at Silicon Valley giants, Indian talent has fueled U.S. innovation. But with stricter visa rules and hostile trade policies, that pipeline is shrinking. Instead of flocking to the United States, India's brightest minds may stay home or head to countries friendlier to their ambitions. The result, a stronger Indian tech sector, potentially in close collaboration with China, and a weaker American edge in innovation. For Washington, India was more than a partner. It was a key piece in its China containment strategy. With a massive army, nuclear weapons, and a history of clashes with Beijing, India was the natural ally to keep China in check. Now, with Modi warming up to Xi Jinping, that advantage has evaporated. Instead of serving as a thorn in China's side, India may become a collaborator. That's not just a loss, it's a reversal of decades of strategic planning. The rise of multipolarity. What's happening isn't just about India. It's about the world shifting toward a multipolar order. For most of the post-Cold War era, the United States was the undisputed leader of global politics. But every time Washington uses economic threats or coercion against its partners, it pushes them toward alternatives. That's exactly what BRICS Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa represents, an alternative to US-led systems. And now, with India leaning harder into that alliance, BRICS has more credibility than ever. For Washington, the consequences are profound. By isolating India, the US hasn't just lost a partner, has strengthened a rival bloc designed to challenge its dominance. Instead of slowing the rise of China and Russia, it has accelerated it. A generational mistake. Foreign policy mistakes happen. But some mistakes don't just affect a single presidency, they reshape the future for decades. Losing India falls into that category. The US has pushed away a country that is not only the world's most populous democracy, but also its fastest growing major economy. India is a nuclear power, a manufacturing powerhouse in the making, and a hub for future technology. To alienate such a country is more than careless, it's historic negligence. Instead of isolating Russia, Washington has strengthened Moscow's friendship with New Delhi. Instead of containing China, it has driven India closer to Beijing. Instead of proving that America is the world's most reliable partner, it has shown that alliances can be discarded on a whim. The consequences are already visible. The balance of power in Asia is shifting, and the global order is changing faster than expected. A world where Washington is just one of several centers of influence, rather than the dominant forces arriving sooner than anyone thought possible. The bottom line, India isn't just another partner that Washington can afford to lose. It's the pivot point for the entire Indo-Pacific strategy. By pushing New Delhi away, the United States has essentially handed Beijing and Moscow a gift. For Americans, the cost will be felt in higher prices, weaker industries, and reduced influence abroad. For India, the rewards are clear: greater independence, stronger ties with alternative powers, and a central role in shaping a multipolar world. And for the rest of us, it's a reminder of how fragile alliances can be. When one superpower treats its partners like pawns, those partners eventually find new tables to play at.